recording now. There we
Okay,
go.
We'll watch our language.
Thank you. I'm calling to order the Finance Committee of Tuesday, March 14th. And just please remember, everyone, that this meeting is being audio and video recorded. May I have an approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Jeremy's on, yeah.
Okay, Jeremy's now on. Okay, so roll call. Stephen?
Aye.
Joanna?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Jeremy? I heard him say aye. Denise, aye. There we go.
Aye.
I'm now opening it for public comment on any topic that is not on our agenda. I am closing it for public comment. We had one.
But Curtis is here.
I know, that's why I looked at it.
We missed him yesterday.
Cheerleader today.
Okay, well, I thought you were gonna talk about something important.
You already did, you missed it. Whoa.
It was off.
Order. Okay, Brian, over to you before it goes completely out of control here. Article 3, appropriation, prior year articles.
Okay, I think Maria's going to put this up. Thank you, Madam Chair. So Article 3 transfers appropriations from one capital article to another. We are moving some in DPW to close out some spending on articles. Given the transition within the DPW, there were some articles that were used for a little more than they had appropriated. So majority of the articles in for DPW are just to close out the old prior articles and then move forward with those. The fire, the self-contained breathing apparatus equipment came in slightly higher than we had expected. So we are moving some from the authorization for the ambulance into that in the amount of $3,664. And then the school had some HVAC work that they had to undergo, and we're transferring some from one of their other repair lines into that to cover the additional cost for that work. All told in the general fund, $174,331.96. Airport has a variety of projects that they're moving money to for some additional cost and additional funding. The majority of the funding in Nobodier Road is just to try to supplement the funding that exists already in anticipation of moving forward with that project. And can you keep scrolling down? I think majority of those are all moving into Nobodier Farm for that particular project. All the projects that we're transferring from are are down to the last dollars in closing out and or may not be moving forward for whatever reasons. The airport chose not to move forward with those. And at the bottom, they are also transferring some retained earnings into various projects. As the Finance Committee will remember, the great majority of the airport borrowing authorizations are just merely for cash flow purposes. And then annually, once retained earnings are certified, they transfer money in to pay the cost of the band so that they don't have any permanent borrowings or fewer permanent borrowings than they have in the past. So if you could scroll down, Maria. At the bottom of this, the airport is requesting $5,867,067.72 be transferred from the above noted funding sources into the above previously approved capital projects. I think that's all correct, Maria.
Yes. Questions for Brian? Stephen?
Brian, I saw the source of one of the transfers was a 2015 town meeting article. It seems like an awful long time ago now. How many, are there any older than that? Do you have any idea of how many hundreds of thousands or millions are in these old articles?
Certainly there are as I think we've previously presented and discussed with the capital program committee, there certainly are a larger than we would like number of projects from previous town meetings that have been approved. Some within sewer, some within the general fund. I think that we have been working really hard with the help of Sue on projects that have started with Rick of closing out all the old articles. So when we go through this with the departments, we ask, do I have an exact number? Not off the top of my head, but my guess would be that it's probably greater than 30 projects right now. Part of that just due to timing and staffing efforts. And we have started talking to departments about projects that were approved. I caught off that we were using internally, Stephen, was 2019. Anything that hasn't been started before that, one would question the validity or urgency of the project at this point, and most likely would need additional funding. So we've been talking with departments about just closing those out to the extent we can, to try to, and if if the project really needed to come back, then we would make it go back through capital process.
We've actually brought this up a bunch of times and have asked previously for a list of these projects when we reviewed the capital budget. So we would understand more fully what departments hadn't executed the money that we allocated for them. So where are we on getting a list of, let's just say pre-2019 projects that are still kicking around?
We can certainly send that to you. We've had numerous discussions with we've had discussions about that with the capital program committee in the past. So we can forward that list to you. That's fine. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Other questions for Brian? Okay, in which case may I have a motion?
So moved. Motion to accept.
Okay,
Second.
thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, roll call, Jeremy. Start with Stephen.
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Denise, I heard Jeremy say aye in the back of my head.
Aye,
Thank you.
sorry, I had,
All right, perfect. Thank you. Article 6, fiscal year 2023, general fund budget transfers, please, Brian.
Sure. So you'll see requesting moving money from police salaries into the operating budget. This is in the amount of $167,250. This is actually, the deputy chief and I had numerous discussions about this. In 22, there was an open PO for police cruisers, and which time near the end of the fiscal year, the chief was informed that most likely we will not be able to get the cruisers, or it was going to take an extremely long time. So that PO was inadvertently closed, and now we do have it. So we are recommending the additional money. We now do have access to additional cruisers on top of the funding that is in the 23 budget. So the deputy chief called and we discussed the fact that we maybe should not have closed that PO last year instead of just removing it from the vendor that we had. So there is money in the salary due to some opening positions that have not been completely filled or the timing to fill. So I agreed with the deputy chief in the discussion that we could transfer the $167,250 back to their operating to purchase the additional cruisers. IT operating into salaries, we're just running into, and this one, we hired somebody a little sooner than we had planned in the budget. So an additional staff person to supplement the transition to a full-time IT security position for internet security and network security. Medical insurance into town clerk salaries. This has to do with the elections and the time that the staff works on those and the upcoming annual town meeting in anticipation of that. Plus we need some money based on the annualization and through overtime usage and funding of positions. We're going to potentially be short there. So this is really a transfer in to cover our bases. If we don't need any of this money in any of these transfers, it will all go back into, it'll all go back to free cash. Plus operating, last year, they had a capital exclusion for a vehicle that was in their operating budget due to transition at the DPW with Central Fleet Manager. This vehicle was actually not purchased, and because it was a capital exclusion, it should have been, we actually should have reserved it on the balance sheet to be able to be used later. We were able to get the vehicle in 23, so because that money fell to free cash, we are requesting to transfer it from free cash to correctly account for that into their operating budget to purchase that vehicle. Fire department, this is something certainly we working on in negotiations. I don't want to get too much deeper into that, but this majority of this money is all related to overtime and the way the overtime structure is in the department itself. Marine salaries, this covers some additional money for the lifeguards from last year. We do charge the majority of it to the beach revolver, but when we go over, that actually goes into the Marine department salaries. And this also will cover some additional overtime or payments for the harbor master and the assistant harbor masters. And then human resources, this is covering, Maria, you'll have to help me with this one because this is the only one I actually don't recall.
They have NewGov, which is a new government software they be using for recruiting, which is about $30,000. And then we decided that we're not gonna charge the health evaluations before, for employees, before we hire them, they have to go through medical. We used to charge that to the health insurance trust, but now we decided we're gonna do that through the human resources, operating budget, and that's the correct way to do it.
And I
So
think that we
that's-
also have some consultants for search firms that we've used or are anticipating needing to use with some upcoming transitions. So
Yeah, for the DPW director, I think that was about $20,000 as well.
and then you also have the police chief.
So the police
well,
chief now too, yes.
Okay, questions?
Brian, why is there $800,000 in medical insurance floating around?
Because medical insurance is for us being self-insured is a moving target in terms of the amount of money needed and what that rate will actually be. And given the fact that we actually don't set the rate until very close to open enrollment, which is May, because with our healthcare consultant and the actuaries that perform the necessary analysis at our consulting firm, typically we try to get as many months of actual current year claims to get a better indicator of what the rate should actually be set at. So when we start the budget process in September, we really only have 1 month of actual claim history to use because July is really a run out from the prior year. And and we basically go with a rough estimate of where we think it is. And we have been fortunate the last couple of years that it's performed far better than we anticipated. So that's an indication that the rate that we started with was a little bit higher than we had. And so that's where it comes from.
Thank you.
It's also,
Other questions?
Peter, to follow up, just one other point to make there. It's also indicative of not being able the hiring, the length of time to hire in the open positions as well, because when we budget health insurance, we plan on a percentage of positions to be filled. And unfortunately, we're not meeting that right now either.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you, Brian.
So one would suggest that you conservatively estimate the medical insurance number just to make sure everything's covered. And then therefore, luckily, it supplies transfers at the end of the year.
Thankfully, it has worked that way, and I hope it never goes in the opposite direction, to be honest with you.
Yeah, nope, understood.
We
Okay,
we see that with the the funded but unfilled positions, particularly at police, but in other departments.
Mhm.
Water company always seems to have excess revenue.
DPW as well.
Bob Gardner's School of Budgeting.
Right. I mean, it's not an insignificant amount of money here. We're talking like,
Mhm.
over percent and a half of the total budget is just available for other things. So I guess it's a useful budgeting tool.
Well, it's less than a
I
percent.
think that was a compliment,
It's
Brian.
800,000.
Well, no, you gotta add in the police salaries, everything on this list here.
Oh, okay, I see what you're
Yeah,
saying.
the medical insurance here is over 800,000.
Yeah.
And add in the other things. yeah.
Okay,
Anyway. it
Okay.
works.
any
Yeah,
other questions
interesting.
for Brian?
No.
Nope, okay, may I have a motion?
Motion to adopt.
Second,
Thank you, Jeremy,
Aye.
thank you, Stephen,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Peter,
aye.
thank you, Denise, I don't know why I have to call my own name, but I seem to need to. Okay, Article 21.
Article 21, this would fund the enterprise funds for fiscal year 24. These are consistent with what was presented. There have been no changes to this from the Saturday meeting. One note in this is that you will note that the solid waste has anticipated revenue. They also have a tax and levy and other general revenues in the amount of 6.8 million. And then directly below that is 3,750,000. This article is, the solid waste funding is contingent on a Proposition 2.5 override ballot question that not only successful town meeting vote, but a successful ballot vote Should that fail, then we will have to go back to the drawing board before we set the tax rate to balance that budget.
And is there enough levy capacity to do that?
No,
Okay,
I haven't quite figured that out in its entirety yet, and which is thankfully why we do have a November meeting. So if it should fail, we will have time to sort through how to do that.
okay, thank you. Other questions? No? Okay. Seeing none,
Motion to adopt.
Second,
any further discussion on the motion? Okay, Jeremy,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Peter,
aye,
aye. Aye,
aye.
Denise, I was better. Okay, 22, please.
So
and-
Article 22 is the enterprise fund capital requests, which have gone through a very rigorous process with capital program committee, to which both the select board and the finance committee was presented a report by capital program committee. I would note the first one with costs associated with the construction of the airport employee housing on Nobody Farm Road. I do know that there was a letter, I believe, from Park Circle sent to everybody in the committee. In reviewing the letter, most likely that would be something that would be taken up by any of the other regulatory boards in approving or reviewing the project. The request here would be to authorize the funding, not to make a determination on the location of the structure on the airport property.
Brian, in terms of that, they're looking at the map that was there attached to it. There's a lot of housing that is in the plan. I mean, do they need all that housing?
I think that was conceptually what it could look like. I think they kind of gone back and forth, Peter, on what that may ultimately look like, which is why the first itineration and the first request is really for more of a dormitory style housing, which would move everybody from the Thompson house on the property, the airport property, and allow them to renovate that into more long-term employee housing. I don't know that the airport actually thinks that they'll ultimately build all of that out. What they did was a conceptual design of what the property could look like, but I don't know. There's been nothing in any of the discussions that we have now indicating that they intend to pursue a full development of that property.
Could that be used for town housing?
In very limited circumstances, given that it's airport property, it would, given the fact that the airport had to push very hard to get the FAA to even allow them to construct housing. It would be my understanding from the previous discussions with the airport that it would be limited to emergency personnel, and most likely would only be firefighters in a very limited capacity that may be able to go in there just because of the dual role with the airport. But could I go there? No, the housing would be very limited in who could go into it if non-airport employees could go into it at all.
It's too bad. Thank you.
Brian, what is the total, like, what's the estimated cost of the whole project and how much of it will the town have to contribute to?
The town is not contributing any money. It would be financed entirely by the airport itself through their revenues and any state or federal grants that they would be able to get or retained earnings. The 3.8, I believe, is the entire cost of developing that particular structure, not including about the approximately 1.3 million I think they authorized last year for OPM design services.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Brian, how many people will this house?
Oh, boy, that was a good question. I have to go back and look, to be honest with you, Jeremy. I can get it to you. I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay.
To be honest with you, it would mainly house it would mainly be a seasonal staff structure, not permanent staff, although they could house somebody in a short-term transitory situation if somebody lost housing temporarily. But it's more dedicated to be seasonal housing. Sue is actually on the call and she might know Sue, do you remember off the top of your head?
Myself. If you give me a minute, I can look it up if you want to keep going and I'll let you know when I have it.
This diagram accurate? It's got 8 dorm style units in that one building. Is that right?
I had 12 in my head, that 12 people could be in it, but I
Yeah.
don't.
This says 8 dorm style units plus a manager's apartment.
Okay, so.
So
being
10.
I
people.
was just struck by how many buildings they've laid out on the tract of land. I mean, wasn't it
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Yeah.
10 or, I mean, it was sort of two U-shaped layout.
Well, it's probably not unreasonable for them to think that
Well-
almost all the people who work at the airport are gonna need housing. Right, because as time goes on, they're squeezed out of the market. Right?
So that's the same diagram twice. I don't know what the difference is. One's got a yellow box.
The yellow
one doesn't.
box moves on the other side of the property.
I see.
So the,
one that
the
they would
letter
build
was
first.
that the Park Circle folks wanted the yellow box to move to the opposite side of the property.
So, yeah, we further away from them.
Either way, yeah, so it's 12 buildings, assuming they all have 9.
On my backyard.
units. That's about what you're looking
Okay. Any other further questions for Brian? No? May I have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Or was there more that we need to go through, Brian, besides airport?
Not unless the committee had any questions. I think that was the only one because that was, that particular request generated the majority of the conversation at the capital program committee over its, life of its meetings. The rest of them were rather, straightforward to the committee.
Okay,
Is there any Our Island Home construction funding in this budget
No.
this year?
That there is not any in the enterprise fund that would be in 25 or 26 at this point, Joe, and that would be in the general fund because that would be a debt exclusion that the town would put forward for the building.
Okay,
but the OPM money was last year, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okey dokey. May I have a motion?
motion to adopt.
Second.
Thank you. Jeremy, further discussion on the motion first? Hearing none. Jeremy,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Joanna, Joe,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Denise, aye. Okay, thank you. And Article 23. In a moment
So
of
starting at the
silence.
bottom, the airport is requesting to transfer 100,000 from both retained earnings and their stabilization fund. Stabilization fund is, as you know, is funded by the airport to pay any retirements or longtime employees who leave, their accrued leave balances being vacation and a percentage of sick leave. They do have a couple, at least one that I'm aware of this year and one that they potentially are anticipating next year. And then they're asking for $2 million to be transferred into their operating fund from retained earnings. I would note that I think they're still working on settling this number. It's not entirely to be transferred into their operating to spend. Jamie at the airport does an incredible job in maintaining their accounts and has done analysis, and the professional services and some other lines do appear to be potentially going over. They're working hard through potential spending freezes right now to see when they get a little bit better handle on where things are headed due to the inflationary environment we're in. But a larger portion of this 2 million potentially, the airport commission has not voted on this, but the likelihood is that the airport staff itself is going to ask for authorization to pay the town a larger number than the 235,000 that is in their budget towards the outstanding remaining debt that they owe to the town for the repayment. The last year they gave us an additional 500,000 on top of the 235,000. So I believe that some of this, a larger percentage of it is going to potentially be used to repay the town to try to pay that off so that they don't have to budget that $235,000 in their budget right now. And while they have retained earnings, it makes sense for them to do that. The last request to transfer into operating is from Ireland Home. It's $1,472,000. I know that it seems rather large. However, the majority of it is coming from salaries. And as most everybody knows, we've had numerous discussions about the difficulty in filling positions, not only across the town, but at the Island Home. Some key positions that are now being filled by consultants being the Island Home Administrator, the Director of Nursing, and then we have some RN positions open and some LPN positions that are open, and some of those are being funded by travel nurses. So the $1,472,000 is being requested to be transferred from the salary line into operating to cover those expenses, which we are still incurring, but in a different way other than direct town personnel.
Questions?
That's in addition to the 5 million that gets that the override from last year goes into the Our Island Home budget?
Yeah, so this is all savings that is in their budget right now in their salary line, and we're incurring those costs through the operating side of the budget rather than salary line.
Okay,
So Brian, how does that work? Is this 1,472,000 on top of the 5 million that the town funds?
Well, it's not on top of the 5 million because the budget was 8 million last year, which included the $5 million override from the town and transfer in. This is money that we expected would have been used through salary line items rather than operating line item. So it doesn't increase the amount that the town is giving. It just
It's just a
redirecting how it
shift.
was allocated originally to a different way, different methodology.
An allocation shift. Okay.
Yes, that's correct. And we did in the budget for fiscal 24, just to let the finance committee know, we did reduce the salary line items given the complexity and the challenge in hiring, and did increase the professional services to account for some of these changes that are most likely going to be more long-term than short-term.
And Brian, when you say professional services, that falls under this operating line item?
That's correct, yes.
Jeremy, are you in a rainforest?
I think I've got you guys on no video, but
No.
No, because
The audio is the
we're
problem.
hearing
That
it
was like
chirping
an
like there's
exotic
birds.
bird or something.
There's a-
oh
Yeah.
yeah, that I'm in my car and I open the windows rather than running the air conditioning. So sorry. I'll turn it on mute.
Hey, Brian.
Okay, I just had a follow-up.
Okay.
So Brian, when we shift from salaries to operating, we're paying consultants or traveling nurses, those come at higher billable rates, don't they? I mean, we're not getting everything in terms of the hours that we had budgeted to get when we thought we'd pay it through full-time employee salaries. Is that right?
We are getting, so as a couple examples, Stephen, the travel nurses, we are getting 40 hours a week, which would be what we would have had hired. But we are paying a substantial higher cost because not only are we paying whatever the travel nurse fee is as a requirement of those agreements, we are also paying to house those travel nurses in locations around the island. We have a contract for an administrator from EF Associates that certainly comes at a higher cost than what we would have what we had budgeted for the actual administrator within the town budget. So yes, there's certainly a higher cost in this operating model. Not something that I think anyone in town administration envisioned as we continue to proceed with operating the nursing home. But I think given the environment and the complexities and being able to hire staff, it's the model that we were kind of moved into at this point. Hopefully it will correct itself, but I don't know when that will be.
So in the aggregate, how much is it?
In the aggregate, how much is what in the aggregate?
This unexpected change to use consultants and part-time labor, how
Well,
much
I mean,
extra how much extra versus what we anticipated?
Well, I mean, it's $3,500 a week for the Island Home Administrator under the contract, which equates to about $197,000 a year versus $140,000 that was originally in the budget plus insurance. So we're at about roughly 25 or 26,000 on increase in cost there. The director of nursing is probably another 40. If it's substantial when you start adding up all the positions that we're filling through this. But if you look at it as an example, we have to staff the facility with RNs, and the only opportunity to get RNs right now, because we can't hire any for a lack of housing, is through travel nurses, and those are about $3,500 a week, roughly thereabouts, plus the cost of the apartment that we have to provide for them.
So is it fair to say that the use of part-time third-party labor for this is $250,000 extra expense? And if that's the right order of magnitude, how is it that just doing this shift of allocated costs, we don't, I guess, run over the 5 million town expected funding?
Well, you have to remember that the budget is 8 million, okay? And we can't spend more than $8 million. And all I'm doing is shifting this cost. So I'm not increasing this. This 1,472,000 does not increase the budget in any way, shape, or form. All it does is move 1 million from salaries into operating expenses. I still have the same authorization that I had previously, so it doesn't change anything. But to answer your question about the order of magnitude, it would be correct to say that the change in model of delivery of services would account for probably anywhere between $500,000 to $650,000 in additional cost right now. But I would actually make the other point that it's more a shifting of cost than substantially increasing cost, because we, in the increase in the budget for fiscal 24, removed close to $600,000 worth of salaries because we don't believe we'll be able to fill those positions and transition that onto the operating side. So it really is just, there is an increase in cost, but it's really just changing the delivery model that we're dealing with right now.
So Brian, it offsets the consultants or contractor costs,
Sure. I
basically.
mean, not on a dollar for dollar basis, but there is an offset to an extent from salaries from when we move the salaries in there. There is some increase, but it's not because it is not a dollar for dollar cost shift.
So how are we able to deliver the services that we had budgeted when we hoped we would get everybody through salaries? Are we just not able to do it? Are we not able
No,
to?
we're delivering the same services as mandated by the state. We're just delivering it through consultants right now versus town staff or employee
Right,
staff.
and we've established that the consultants cost more money than the salaried employees we had budgeted.
But it's
for.
not a surprise that we needed these consultants. It's
Well,
been a
it's
couple
somewhat
of
of a
years.
surprise because we didn't budget it that way. We planned for salaries and now we're paying through professional services, which comes at a higher rate.
And
But we're not filling every job.
That's what I'm asking. Are we not able to?
Caring for the same number of people? I mean,
Well, if you're not caring for the same number of people, we would have seen that in the census, and the census was a better to hire. So are we just?
We're
not
still
able to-
maintaining the same services because we're required to. I mean, the reality is when we built the 23 budget, I don't think we envisioned the severity of this problem and being able to fill staff. Ideally, I would prefer to have staff that's employed by the town because it certainly is a better delivery model for us because it costs us less. But if we're going to continue to operate the facility right now, this is the model of delivery of services that we have to do.
So Brian, let me take one final crack at this. I understand that we have to provide the services and we found a way in order to do that. But what I don't understand is in so doing, we seem to have incurred roughly $500,600,000 of additive costs versus our base assumptions. So how are we able to spend that extra $500,000 or $600,000, deliver the same services, and still come in at the regular budget? Was the budget just padded with a lot of extra stuff?
Well, I mean, in this year, it's not necessarily 600,000 because due to the timing of the transition. So we will come in under budget. And if we appears in the analysis which we continue to do every week, looks like we're going to be running over into some type of shortfall, then we'll start to ratably bring back spending. And, that could be, we'd have to make decisions on how to do that. We will not go over the budget. We cannot go over the budget lawfully. So we're not going to spend $600,000 more than the $8+ million authorized. We have to stay within that budget. This delivery service potentially adds $500,000 or $600,000 of cost, but due to the timing of some of these hirings, it most likely is not going to fully in this year equate to that. On a full year basis, it most likely will account for potentially $500,000 to $600,000, but we've already accounted for that in the fiscal 24 budget.
Brian, if you
Like,
can,
I got it.
For an example, we had a director of nursing for a vast majority of this fiscal year, okay? When they left, we advertised the position twice, could not get anyone, so therefore had to contract with EF. We contracted with EF Associates for a director of nursing at an increased cost than what we would have paid for an employee, but we have not had that for the whole year. So a $500,000 to $600,000 increase is on a full year basis, not necessarily in this fiscal year due to the timing of the change in the transitions and what we've needed. We have had some RNs during the year. Unfortunately, they've left and we have not been able to refill those positions. So every anything that's been shifted to a consultant this year has not necessarily been shifted effective July 1st.
Okay, so the services constraints and the change in the way you get them
Mhm.
has created a run rate of 600,000, let's say delta from what you'd anticipated. But that really is going to be affected in next year's budget where you've already budgeted for that.
That's correct.
Okay, I understand.
Brian, if you counted the consultants as full-time equivalents, how many openings are there on the staff? How many full-time equivalents?
I would have to go back and ask Island Home, to be honest with you, Peter. I don't know. I'm not sure entirely off my head. I know that you have the director of nursing and you have the administrator, so that's 2 right there. We have 4, due to the difficulty in hiring travel nurses, we have 4 on staff right now. I think we have 3 being utilized or 4 being utilized. So that's 4 positions. So right there, there's about 6 positions minimum.
Okay, so that's generating a lot of capital to use
Yeah.
to pay the consultants.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, may I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay,
Second,
okay, thank you. Jeremy,
Aye,
Stephen,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Peter,
aye.
Denise, I thank you.
Uh,
Okay, item number 6. There's no motions left to be adopted. We're done. Tick. Date of next meeting is Monday, March 20th, fully on Zoom. It's the meeting where the planning board, the select board, and the finance committee gets together to ask any questions you may have of each other in respect of their motions. We tend to find that to be a pretty zippy meeting in prior years.
Right.
Fully remote.
And fully remote, yes. And any committee reports? Seeing none. Any other business? Seeing none. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service. And thank you, Curtis, for coming. for me.
Yes.
Thank you, Maria. It's been the easiest year yet, honestly.
thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Susan. Rick.
Yeah.
here.
No, thank you to everybody on the committee. We certainly appreciate all of the time and effort that you put into reviewing this and getting everything prepared for town meeting. So thank you very much to all of you as well.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Stephen.
Aye.
Joanna.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Jeremy.
aye.
Denise. I. We are done. Thank you.
Thank you and good night.